National Geographic today, January 16th, 2019, just uploaded a 10-minute video to their YouTube channel with 10 million subscribers, and it's called Flat Earth versus Round Earth. And obviously, the mainstream corporate TV company is setting out to debunk the flat Earth. Let's see if what National Geographic presents holds up to the science.
You'd think that with the beautiful photographs that we have of our round blue planet, it would convince any doubters. But there are still some who insist that the world is flat.
Neil deGrasse Tyson says it's flat from 35,000 feet. He said you can't see curvature from 128,000 feet.
Correspondent Mariana Van Zella discovers more about this fast-growing movement in California.
I'm Mariana Van Zeller, and I'm in Southern California to look into a growing movement in America.
They've decided to actually know why we believe we live on a sphere. Most people believe it purely on blind faith. It's a religious thing. When you look into it, you find out that a lot of the evidence for the globe is garbage.
People who claim the Earth is flat. They call themselves the Flat Earthers, and we're here to try to understand what's behind this unconventional view and how it can affect the rest of us.
If you think the Earth is flat, then you're going to be against measures to fight climate change.
So what's happening here today? Why are you here?
Flat Earth shows you that you are not a mistake, and you were created, and so you have meaning and you matter to the world.
It's quite rational. You have two worldviews. You have the spinning space ball that 99% of people on Earth believe in through blind faith, the biggest religion in the world, and that teaches you that you are a speck of dust that blew up out of the Big Bang purely by mistake. And then you have a geocentric and then leading to the flat Earth cosmology, which obviously implies that there's more going on than just a Big Bang space accident.
Do you think it's a growing movement?
Yes, and we're networking and getting stronger.
No shit, it's a growing movement. That's why you're out there interviewing them, lady.
People are realizing it. It's coming out in the
You can't just naysay skeptics. We're all big fans of skeptics. We're basically the skeptic community,
media.
Hi. We see with all the attention that you must be Mark Sargent.
I am Mark Sargent.
Thanks for meeting us here.
And it looked like she was about to hint. Looked like she was hinting, oh, look at all the attention you're getting, Mark. Again, I think they're trying to push forward the cult aspect. There's a leader to the cult.
Yeah, we're gonna open this thing up. And the reality looked something like this.
That's a beautiful model, I must say.
Your belief in the Earth being flat flies in the face of
Hundreds of years
of evidence, of scientific evidence that the world is round. Not only that, we have satellite imagery. We have photos from space that prove that the Earth is round.
We can't prove anything that's going on. We can't prove what pictures from space, if they're real or not. We can't prove whether or not the space station or the satellites are doing what they tell us that they're doing. We can't prove any of that stuff and test things down to Earth. That's how this National Geographic hit piece ends. They do a long distance zoom test over the Salton Sea, as you'll see in a moment. So again, they love to point to the sky. What about all the stuff that you can't check for yourself? You can't falsify, you can't verify, you can't reperform. Let's bring it down to Earth. They want to mystify you with things you can't prove. Watch.
Oh, it's beautiful, Mike. It really is.
So you don't believe that people traveled in space?
No.
NASA was basically a bunch of Nazi scientists. I mean, look it up. I think it's Operation Paperclip. NASA was basically run by Nazi scientists, rocket scientists. So you should be like, why are you defending Nazis? And she'd be like, she had a fucking panic attack. So funny.
Mark and his fellow flat earthers seem to be pretty convinced that the Earth is flat and that we've all been lied to for all these years. But I'm interested in knowing what kind of impact this might have, not only for science, but for society at large.
There's real science, and then there's hijacked, dogmatic, fake science, pseudoscience.
The universe began about 14 billion years ago, an event that we call the Big Bang.
Oh yeah, we just know that. Oh yeah, 14 billion years ago.
James Bullock is a professor of physics and astronomy at the University of California, Irvine.
Did you ever think a few years ago that you'd be having this discussion?
It's frankly shocking. We've known for 2,000 years, based on observations you can make with your own eyes.
They have all the evidence right in front of them and they still choose not to believe in it.
Again, ships disappearing bottom up. Okay, that's a classic from the ancient Greek days. For centuries, we're content with just saying, "Oh, of course we live in a ball. Look, ships disappear bottom up, dummy." Now, when you go out with a P1000 mega zoom camera and you see a lighthouse that's supposed to be hidden by 80 feet, now there's a big caveat they didn't mention. The globetards didn't mention for thousands of years. And guess what that is? A refraction. Now, refraction is lifting the lighthouse up behind the horizon so you can see it. So technically it's hidden, but the light is refracting up and now you can see the whole lighthouse. So technically you're looking at a hologram. Oh, the lighthouse is supposed to be hidden by 80 feet. Oh, we forgot to tell you. There's refraction bending light. Sometimes you can see the whole lighthouse. Sometimes you can't see the whole lighthouse. It's just warping and bending. So when Aristotle saw ships disappearing bottom first, what was he seeing? Was he seeing a refraction, a hologram? Which one is which? See, it's a lot more complicated than they teach you in school. The moment you start to ask questions, you start to realize that there's very little evidence for a spinning ball.
Science is important. Science is valuable. Science saves lives, it makes our lives better and more comfortable, and it enriches us intellectually. And to question what scientists are saying and suggest that they're part of some massive international global conspiracy, it's really scary.
So Joe Rogan loves talking about how the sugar industry bought off scientists to write studies saying that like fat is bad for you or something like that. Okay, it's very well known that scientists can be bought off. So to arrogantly suggest that it is impossible for scientists to not be bought off, that scientists, which are just human beings at the end of the day, are incorruptible, is so arrogant and misleading. It's disgraceful and funny.
Are they a threat to the work that you do as a scientist?
If, say,
Of course they're a threat. Because if they stop going to your colleges because they don't believe what you're telling them is 100% accurate, and they just want to be skeptics,
governments stop funding science because of some kind of anti-science, anti-intellectual feedback they're getting from the populace, that's when it really starts getting dangerous for our civilization.
Some Americans are fighting back.
A group that essentially debunks paranormal claims, and they want to do a round Earth test.
Okay, this is the boat-based target, it's horizontal stripes. We're going to launch a small boat out into the water here. And as it gets farther and farther out, you'll start to lose the stripes.
As the boat approaches the horizon, it appears to slowly dip down.
Okay, wait a minute. I was literally talking about how this proof of the globe was misattributed to Aristotle like a few minutes ago, and now National Geographic appears to have misattributed to Aristotle. So they're here to debunk the dumb flat earthers, but they're not even smart enough to do the proper research. One of the most commonly cited texts where Aristotle talks about his proofs for the globe is his treatise called On the Heavens, by Aristotle, of course. And I went ahead like months ago and I looked and I read his treatise on the heavens to see what his proofs were. And I noticed that nowhere I could see anything written about ships disappearing bottom up as a proof of the globe, like National Geographic just said. And I found on stackexchange.com, somebody had actually asked this question: did Aristotle note that ships disappear over the horizon hull first? The best answer I see is right here. We see that the proof of the sphericity of the Earth, based on the fact that masts of a ship are visible above the horizon when the body of the ship is no longer visible, this has been attributed to Aristotle in De Caelo, which I think is a book, but it does not appear there. It does, however, appear in De Revolutionibus of Copernicus in reference to a light on the tip of a mast. A similar statement may be found in Ptolemy's Alchemist, where it is stated, quote, Whenever we sail towards mountains or any high places from whatever angle, in whatever direction, we see their bulk little by little increasing as if they are rising from the sea, whereas before they seem submerged because of the curvature of the water's surface. And the person concludes, so it appears that while Aristotle had several arguments for the sphericity of Earth, he did not in fact argue it based on ships sinking below the horizon. However, it is often falsely attributed to him. This is a video from Soliloquy, uploaded in April of 2015, and it talks about how did ancient Greek philosophers know the Earth was round? And it goes over some of the proofs and evidences that Aristotle provided, including, as you can see right here, shadow of the Earth on the moon during a lunar eclipse. But then he moves on to another one that Aristotle wrote down. Let's listen.
He also noted that as a traveller moved south, the southern constellations rise higher and higher above the horizon. Since the constellations were not moving for those not travelling, the only option to explain this was the horizon was falling, evidence of a curved surface.
Right, and that's actually listed in Aristotle's treatise on the heavens. But what's not listed is ships disappearing bottom up. Now let's keep watching the video.
Together, these astrological observations convinced Aristotle, and almost anyone else educated at the time, that the Earth was indeed a sphere. Later, other ancient scholars built upon Aristotle's arguments. Claudius Ptolemy put forth the arguments that as a ship sailed towards the horizon, it vanishes hull first.
Ships disappearing bottom up as an argument for the proving the globe is attributed to Ptolemy, not to Aristotle. So something's messed up here.
It appears to slowly dip down into the water before disappearing completely. That's got everything to do with the curvature of the Earth. If the planet was flat, the entire boat would remain visible.
So here's what's incredibly stunning. Look what they've done. They've literally showed you the answer to this ancient hoax. So you see these angles here. So this is a diagram that I made to show my brother. We were going on a discussion on this very topic about things disappearing bottom up, and I decided to create this diagram to help explain it, to show how things can disappear bottom up. So first of all, notice that this looks very similar to what National Geographic shows you here. Look familiar? Notice how you have a guy over here observing something. You have these two angles here, or technically it's this one, the blue line, big angle, and then there's the line going straight across in a tangent from the level of his telescope. So you have a straight line tangent, and then you have the two big lines, because that's how your vision works, believe it or not. It works in angles. So if we come down here, so I made this diagram. It's pretty much, it's funny because I made this 2 weeks ago, and now National Geographic comes out with this thing. I mean, it's just like, sometimes the timing is too much. So I have a guy standing here. You have the angle of his vision to the top of the boat, and you have the angle to the bottom of the boat, and then you have this tangent line going straight out from his eye level. What do you notice? What you'll notice is that the angle below his eye level, this is a smaller angle right here than the angle up here, because just trace the lines. So I made a more expanded version of this, as you can see here. Imagine the person is standing over here, and this is the same boat, but at different distances. Same boat, but imagine that each one is just different distances further and further away from the person. We already know from this image that the bottom angle is smaller than the top angle. Now, if we go to this one, what you're going to notice is that as the boat gets further and further away, the angle to the bottom of the ship is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, it's also getting smaller for the top of the ship. Okay, look at the red line. This is the red line from the person's eye to the top of the ship to the closest ship. Now look at the black line, which is from the person's eye to the further away ship. Notice the angle is obviously a smaller angle. The red angle is larger than the black angle. Then we look at the line from the person's eye, the green one, all the way to the top of the ship over here. And what do you see? You see that the green angle to the top of the furthest ship is actually even smaller than the black one and smaller than the red one. The same is also true with the angles below the person's eye level. And so as the ship gets further and further out, the angles to the ship get thinner and thinner and thinner. Because the person that's standing looking at these ships, their eye line is below the midpoint of the ship's height. 10 inches on this ruler matches the height of the boat. So halfway on the boat would be the 5-inch mark. Because they're lower than the halfway point in terms of their height of the ship's total height, they're close to the ground, you're going to get a smaller angle on the bottom portion of the ship than the rest of the ship above the eye line. The consequence of this is that as the ship gets further and further away, causing all the angles above his eye line and below his eye line, causing all the angles to get smaller, because the angles below his eye line are already smaller than those above his eye line, the bottom of the ship is going to eventually disappear first before the top of the ship, simply because the bottom of the ship has a smaller angle associated with it than the top of the ship. But most people who are standing on the shoreline, in fact, let's go back to this wonderful presentation diagram provided by National Geographic. According to National Geographic, as you can see, most people are standing on a shoreline like this, and boats are naturally bigger than the average 6-foot tall person. Way bigger, if you're talking about masts and sails. So people are not just above, floating in the middle of the air. You're basically on the surface of the water. So it's fascinating to me that National Geographic would present it and even show you the angles. Notice how there's a smaller angle on the bottom half below their eye line than on the top. The smaller the angle is, the less room there is for pixels in your vision to be resolved. And when there's not enough pixels, it blinks out and disappears. So the bottom actually would disappear. The ship would disappear bottom up. Very, very fascinating. So let's keep watching.
If the planet was flat, the entire boat would remain visible.
Or maybe if you just understood how angles and vision works.
So it'll be a very visual depiction of the curvature of the Earth.
Yeah, indeed. Very visual. Yes, that's how it works.
Of the flat earthers, including Mark Sargent, are actually going to be here for this test. They want to see it for themselves.
But cannot work.
Cannot work?
So I heard that Salton Sea, the location they're doing this test on, is one of the most humid, warpy, it's like one of the densest, most humid places in California.
At first, all the stripes are clearly visible. But sure enough, as the boat reaches the horizon, the stripes begin to disappear one by one.
Are they going to tell us how far away the boat is? Are they going to talk to us about the distances and all that stuff? And by the way, did they secure that giant freaking thing down to the boat, or is it just some dude holding it, wavering up and down? I hope they were precise.
So this can only happen why?
Because of the curvature of the Earth.
You have to understand that if that boat was, let's say, 5 miles away, there's 5 miles of ripples and waves on the water. And when a ripple is, but when something is closer to you, like maybe a ripple on the surface of water, and you've got 5, 10, 20 miles, when you've got 5, 10, 20 miles of ripples in front of you, the ripples that are closer have a larger angular size value than some sign you're holding right above the water, far, far away, 20 miles away.
So here's what we're shooting.
But Mark Sargent and the other flat earthers have a very different interpretation of the results.
So you don't think that what we're seeing is actually real? You think it's because of heat?
Oh, absolutely heat.
This is a demonstration. It doesn't change anything for you.
Lord, no.
I still don't understand though, like who's gaining from all this, from this large conspiracy?
The highest authority, higher than presidents, the super rich, people that are behind the scenes. Remember, the first rule of power is stay hidden.
So this is for me where I think it gets really dangerous, because we're going back into the dark ages, right? You're essentially perpetuating ignorance by denying science. You know, there's a real life implication in all of this. Dismiss this as just a silly theory and unimportant. But the problem is that it's a growing movement in America. More and more young people seem to believe that the world is flat. And, you know, it's more than just distrusting government. It's this notion
This lady looks like such a rich white liberal.
that thousands of years of empirical scientific evidence is now being dismissed as a mere conspiracy. And that's where I think it really starts getting dangerous for all of us.
They didn't show the part with the giant balloons. Now, apparently, obviously, when National Geographic was out there at the Salton Sea and they were performing this experiment, there were a bunch of flat earthers there. And of course, the flat earthers were recording the whole shit. And there was a lot of controversy. This is a video from Geographic YouTube channel. Links to all these videos are below, by the way, in the description. But Geographic uploaded a video clip that a flat earther captured on the scene for a secondary version that National Geographic and the Independent Investigations Group were performing with giant balloons. You saw the experiment with the giant red, black, white stripe, but what about they had these giant white balloons? Well, check this out. I'll just go ahead and play this clip from Geographic, links in the description.
In fact, we've got video shown here of them saying they see these balloons. Do those look 40 feet from the sea level to you? Yeah, me neither.
You can see both of them. Perfect. Yep. All right, Josh, help them.
Now here, try to listen carefully to the conversation this guy in the black shirt with the tan shorts is having. He's telling them that the guy next to him just was spotted. The balloons were spotted by the other side. And whoever he's talking to on the phone says something to the effect of, well, he can't see you because he can't look over the curve. Basically saying it's impossible that we would be able to see you right now, yet they just were spotted. They were seen. And he says, okay, good, glad. Go tell them that you can see us. And then the guys on the other side are saying, no, that's impossible. You can't see over the curve. Listen.
In the secondary experiment with these giant balloons, there were flat earthers on the other side of the lake zooming in, and they could see the balloons that are not supposed to be visible according to the globe model. And interestingly enough, that experiment was excluded from this National Geographic hit piece on flat Earth.